Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatar varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namah Sudismati Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram. So in the last session we were discussing about this Itaredara Asaya dosha. That is the Bhattas and Vrittigaras also. Sometimes, Vrittigara also takes a Bhatta use of Prabhakara's views. That is, Atma is always linked to Sharira. Their idea of Atman is Atman functioning through Sharira. And then Atma acting as Yajamana, Karta. So, when the Siddhantin said that it is only Mithya Jnanam that creates the impression that Atman works through Sharira or Atman is linked to Sharira, then the Purvakshin gives an example, Sannidhana Matrena Jaja Pravudinam Drishtam Kartavyam Iti Chet. So sometimes kings can get their things done through the Bhrityas, through this Swami Bhritya Sambandha. Whatever the Bhrityas do, the Kartrupta goes to the Swami. In this context, Swami is Atma. And Bhrityas are Sharira, Indriya, etc. Sharira, Indriya, all these act on behalf of Atma. So all yajnas and yagas are being performed by Ritiks. But Yajamana is the Karta. Yajamanatvam is Atmanaha. So this is a Mithya Jnanam according to Siddhantim. It is the natural state of Kartrutvam of Atma according to Prabhakaras, Bhattas and Vrittigara. The example is Sannidhi Matrena Raja Prabhudinam Drishtam Kartavyam Iti Chetna. So Siddhantin denies that. Dhana Dhanadi Uvarjita Vritya Sambandhitva Tesham Kartrutvapatehi. Natu Atmanaha Dhana Dhanadivat Shariradivi Suswami Sambandha Nimittam Kinji Shakim Kalpaidam. So Vrityas act according to the instructions of Swami, the master. But there is a Sambandha, and the Sambandha is linked to Dhana Dhanadi. The Swami master, the Raja, distributes wealth and charity, salary, all these things to Vrityas. So there is a Sambandha. The Vrityas are dependent upon the Swami. So Swami, that is Swami Vritya Sambandha. So the Vrityas belong to the Swami, also Swami Vritya Sambandha. Now that kind of connection doesn't exist with regard to Atma. So Tesham Kartutovatehi Natu Atmanaha Dhana Dhanadivis Shariradivis Swami Sambandha. So Atma has no connection with Sharira. So always remember, the idea that Atman is linked to Sharira is a Mithya Jnanam. But that is a natural concept of Mimamskas and Vrittigara. So they believe they say Ritiks perform yajnas and yagas on behalf of Yajamana, and the result and the responsibility goes to Yajamana, the person on whose behalf this yajnas and yagas are conducted. Similarly, Atma has got Kartrutva for all the activities done by Sharira, Indriya, Mana, Chitta, all these, Antakarana, etc. This is how they interpret. Mithyabhimanastu pratyakshaha sambandha heduhu. So this idea that somehow there is a connection, sambandha, relationship between Sharira and Atma. It is Mithyabhimana. Mithyabhimana is that identification with I with Sharira, and of course identification with Mana, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankara, etc. Pratyaksha. So it's obvious. Etena yajamanatum atmanaha vyakhyadam. This is how we must understand this idea to be interpreted. That is atmanaha yajamanatum, atmanaha kartrutvam, atmanaha sarirabhimana. This idea behind. Because according to Mimamsakas, yajamana is the enjoyer, the bhakta of punya, papa, adrishta, apurva, surga prapti, etc. Similarly, whatever the sarira, indriya, all they will do, Atma is the bhakta, karta and bhakta. Now, here, Atrahu, Vrittigara accepts Prabhakara's views. So, Purvapakshi, Dehadi Vedriktasya Atmanaha, Atmiya Dehavat Abhimanaha, Atmiya Dehu Abhiman, Dehadu Abhimanaha. So, Atmiya means something related to Atma, Deha, so one's own, Deha, etc. Abhimana, Gauna, Namithya, Idichit. So, this is an argument. Dehadi Vedriktasya Atmanaha, Purvaksha. Deha, Indriya, all these are distinct and different from Atman. But then Atmanaha, Atmiye Dehadu, Abhimanaha. So in his own, in one's own Deha, Deha means Deha is Sthula Sarira, Sukshma Sarira, which includes Puriyastaka means Mana, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankara, Antakarana, etc. Abhimanaha. Gaunaha, Namithya, this is a new argument. Gauna means amukhyam or apradhanam, but real. So Gauna is not unreal, Gauna is only amukhyam and apradhanam. So Purvapakshi is somehow tried to save his ground by coming down a little, still wants to wants to emphasize some connection between Dehadi Vidiktatma and Atmiya Sarira Dehadu, his own, one's own Sarira Dehadi, etc. So it is Gauna. Gauna means, example, actually, there are many examples we can say. The Tikakaras give plenty of examples. So one example is given, and it's in the old books, Simha and Maitra, they are two different beings. Now Chaitra is another person, a human being. His friend is Maitra, and there is Simha. So maybe the Maitra may be a very bold person, strong person, courageous person, having all the characteristics of Simha. But Chaitra knows that they are two different beings. Chaitra knows they are two different beings, and still he may call Maitra Simha. In that case, it is Gauna. If Chaitra calls Maitra with the name Simha, then it is Gauna. If, but at the same time, Chaitra calls Simha as Simha, it is Mukhya. In other words, to call Gauna, you should know the distinction. At the same time, there are similarities, which is justification for this Gaunatum, for calling a person. I am Simha, means the person whom you call Simha, there are certain things about that person which are similar to the characteristics of Simha. So in a Gauna sense, because of some characteristics, Chaitra knows Simha and Maitra are different persons. But still Chaitra calls Simha, then is Mukhya. If Chaitra calls Maitra, a Simha, then it is Gauna. So this is the argument. Of course, these are all different characteristics. Later we'll come to that, etc. So this a long argument is beginning now. The argument is simple. According to Urubakshi, it is Gauna, not Mukhya, but it is a fact. That means, what does it mean? Sharira has certainly some connection with Atma, or Atma has also some connection with Sharira. So, this Dehabhimana is real, but it is only in a secondary sense. If they argue that it is real, it won't be acceptable to Siddhantin. Because Siddhantin wants to establish it is Mithya. It is Mithya Jnana. I mean, the so-called Sambandha between Sharira and Atma is Mithya Jnanam. It is non-existent. So, that's what he's going to assert now with some examples. Siddhantin say it is not Gauna, it is Mithya. Because if it is accepted Gauna, then you have to admit that Atma and Sharira has got some connection, some relationship. In the way, for example, Simha and a person whom you may call Simha has got some characteristics, some sambandha, because he may be as brave as a Simha. So you can call him Simha, actually. So the classical example, Simho Manava, the young man is like a Simha. Manava means young man. So anyway, this is what we are going to discuss now. Now the argument is Prasiddha Vastu Bhedasya Gaunatta Mukhyatva Prasiddhehi. Now to understand to be able to argue that it is Gauna, you should know the exact distinction between the two. And then only you can call it Gauna. There should be a clear distinction between Sharira and Atma. That distinction should be very clear. Then only you can call a person a Simha in a Gauna sense. But here, you don't really understand the distinction between the two, because Atman you don't know. Simha and Maitra you know. You can see it. Then you know that there are some characteristics that they share. But here, the characteristics of Atman, as Advaitins understand, are not obvious. But Atman doesn't have any characteristic. So that's why Prasiddha Vastu Bhedasya. It should be Prasiddha Vastu. Here one item is Prasiddha Sharira, but what about Atman? It's not Prasiddha Vastu. So Gaunatva Mukhyatva Prasiddhehi. So one is Gaunam, the other is Mukhyam. This distinction can be understood only with regard to certain things which are quite obvious. Yasya ki Prasiddho Vastu Bhedaha Yatha केसरादिमान आकृति विशेषो अन्वय व्यतिरेकाभ्याम सिंह शब्द प्रत्ययभांग मुख्यः अन्यः प्रसिद्धः ततश्च अन्यः पुरुषः प्रायिकैः क्रौर्य शौर्यादिभिः सिंहगुणैः संपन्न सिद्धः तस्य पुरुषे सिंह शब्द प्रत्ययो गौणो भवतु न अप्रसिद्ध वस्तु भेदस्य. So if you don't know the difference between Simha and Manava, in this context, Simho, Manava, etc., young man, then you cannot use the word Gauna. So the example is given here in some of these commentaries based on that. It's very interesting to know this. That is, the person who is linked here should know the distinction. But here in this context, Atmanaha Kartrutvam and Atmanaha Sambandhaka with Sarirati, etc. it's based on only the assumption. And this assumption is destroyed through Brahmajnanam. So, before knowing anything about Brahman, you cannot really use the word Gauna. That is, Sharirabhimana is a Gauna, secondary characteristics of Atma. Just like the Shaurya, Kraurya, or even physical characteristics, Kesara, Dimana, Akriti Visheshaka, all these, the physical characteristics of Simha, of lion, especially shape and form. All these you cannot really explain in the light of Gauna, Mukhyatva, etc. And here the Bhashyakara is Annaya Vitireka Simha Sabda Pratyek Vankya. So Annaya and Vitireka, that should be kept in mind, Annaya means, for example, if there is, means Tat Sattve, Tat Sattvam. This is Annaya Tadabhave Tadabhava. Vitireka means if there is a cause, Karana, there is Karyam, that is Annaya. If there is no cause, there is no Karya, is Vitireka. Means, so these are all, these well-known elementary lesson, Murda Bhave, Kada Bhave, Vitireka. And Mur Sattve, Gada Sattvam is Annaya. So if a human being, a young person, has got all these characteristics like, Kesara, Dimana, Akriti Visheshaka, his face, all these characteristics, physical characteristics of a lion, if that person, the Manava, has got it, then he has got characteristics. So he can say Gauna. It is possible, but the characteristics of Atman we don't know. So you cannot say this Sharirabhimana is Gauna. So Annaya Vitireka Simha Shabda Pratyaya, Simha Shabda and Simha Pratyaya. Simha Shabda used and also Simha Pratyaya, the knowledge, the both are as Simha. Only because of this Annaya Vitireka analysis. Mukhyaha Anyaha Prasiddhi. Tadascha Anyaha Purushaka Prayikehi Kraurya Shauryadevi Simha Guneki Sampannaha Siddha. Tasya Purushe Simha Shabda Pratyaya Gauno Bhavataha. Na aprasiddha vastu bhedasya. That is very important. If we don't know the difference, na aprasiddha vastu bhedasya. If we don't know the distinction, the differences between Simha and Manava, then you don't use the word Simha, because the person who calls Manava Simha knows that there are two different entities. Otherwise you don't have to call Gauna. When you call Simha, it is not Gauna, it is Mukhya. When you call a human being a Simha because of his characteristics, lion-like characteristics, that is Gauna. Otherwise it becomes Mukhya. But in this context, you don't know this distinction between Sharira and Atman because you don't know the characteristics of Atman. So how do you call one Gauna? Impossible. Tasya tu anyat Anyatra Anyashabda Pratyayo Bhranti Nimitto Eva Bhavatu Na Gauno. Then it will be only Bhranti Nimitto, only an error. It is an error. Yatha Mandandhagari Sthanu Rayamiti Agrihyamana Visheshe Purusha Pratyayo Sthana Vishayo. So, for example, when there is not enough light, you say it is I am Sthanu. This is Sthanu, you say wooden post or something. You don't know this, and you say it is human being. No, that is only a Brahmajnanam. And the Brahmajnanam is another example. As I yesterday during conversation I said, Pratyaksha Jnanam also can be Brahmajnanam. And it can also be Yadhartha Jnanam. At the Pratyaksha level, Pratyaksha Jnanam should not be misconstrued as the same as the absolute realization. Aparokshanabhuti. Pratyaksha Jnanam is the only empirical sense, includes both Yathartha Jnanam, like when you understand Simha. Yesterday we mentioned, when you call something as it is Vastu Tantra. When you call a pot is Vastu Tantra. When you mistake for something, it is Purusha Tantra. Because it is Purusha Buddhyathinam. It is due to an error, a Brahma, that is natural for every human being. But when you call an object by what it is Vastu Tantra. It is based on the object itself. That's why in Mandandhakara, when there is not enough light in a room, there is a dim light, then Sthanurayam, Idi, Agrihyamana Visheshe. You don't understand what it is, then you know what you call is Sthanurayam. So you think it is Sthanu. And this misunderstanding can happen. Like that, this may be misunderstanding. When you see Gaunatvam in this Atma, Sharira, Sambandha, because it doesn't exist. Gaunatvam always implies some degree of reality. Because there is certainly some degree of reality between a person who is called a Simha and Simha itself. Because there are some characteristics that person has got, which make people call him, in a Gauna sense, secondary sense, I am Simha. So there is certainly an element of reality. But in this context, there is absolutely no connection or sambandha between Atma and Sharira. That is. So somehow, there is so much of effort made to establish some connection between Atma and Sharira. Because if that can be done, then somehow you can either establish the Vrittigara's view, which gives importance to different kinds of dhyana and upasana, or Mimamsaka's view, which make it subservient, subsidiary, or maybe secondary to Vidhivakyas in either context. Because the moment you give kartrutvam for Atma, immediately Kriya, Yajna, Yaga, Drishtam, Apuram, all these Punya, Papa, all these will emerge. And then at the most you can think of Jnana, Karma, Samuchaya. It's certainly a far more advanced system compared to Vrittigara Madam or Prabhagara or Bhatta Madam. But even then it will be dilution of Advaita. That's why Shankaracharya, Bhashyakara never admits that. It doesn't yield an inch of the ground. He says it is Mithya Jnana only. It is Brahma Jnana only. So again, Yathava Suktigayam Akasmat Rajadam Idi Nischido Sabda Pratyo Tadvat Dehadi Sanghadi Ahamidi Nirupacharena Sabda Pratyo Atmanatma Vivekena Utpadyamano Katham Gauno Sakyo Vadidum. Now here again this argument continues. Similarly, see in Dehendriya we say I. We use the word, and that is only because you don't understand the distinction between Atma and Anatma. So this Taddu Dehadi Sanghadi Aham. Dehadi Sanghada means the normal human being. Akamidi Nirupacharena Sabda Pratyo Atma Anatma Vivekena Utpadyamano. Here Atma Anatma Avivekena. It's a spelling mistake here. Atma Anatma Avivekena. I think so. Is it so? Spelling mistake in your book? Here the spelling is Atma Anatma Avivekena. This is spelling old book. It's not. So it is because of absence of Atma Anatma Viveka that you have this Sabda Pratyaya. Use the word Aham. And also when you use the Sabda Pratyaya, Bodha, Aham Bodha, means this Dehendriya Sankhada, this is I, this Bodha. This happens, Katham Gauno Shakyo Vadidum, how can you say it is Gauna? It is impossible. Atma Anatma Vivekinam api Pandidanam Aja Vipalanam Iva Avivakto Sabda Pratyo Bhavataha. So frequently this happens, just like common people, those who are taking care of cattle, this example is given there, like that for Atma Vivekins also make this distinction. Normal sin in a Aupacharika way they make the distinction. Therefore, even those tasma dehadi vidriktatma astitvadinam. So even those who argue that there is dehadi vidriktatma, an atma which is distinct and different from dehadi, from deha, indriya, all this, all sukshma sharira, purishta and all that. Those who believe, those who argue that there is an atma, believe in an atma which is dehendriyadi vedirikta. Even for them, dehado aham pratyayo mithyaiva na gunaha. So it is this usage, this understanding, this bodha, dehado aham pratyaya. It is mithyaiva na gunaha. That's idea. Tasmat mithya pratyaya nimittatva sasharirattvasya siddham. So this now Bhashyakara gives a very short description of the Jivan Mukta, also the concept of Jivan Mukti. Give you an example from Brihadaranyaka, I can find it here, it's very important. Tasma dehadi vidrikta atmastitvadinam dehadu aham pratyaya mithya eva nagagunaha. So, mithya, that's very clear. Tasma mithya pratyaya nimittatvad sasharirattvasya siddham jivataha api vidushu ashariratvam. So that's why tasmat mithya pratyaya nimittatvad sharirattvasya siddham. So the sashariratvam, it means the idea that Atma is existing along with the Sharira, that is Shariratvam. Atma has got the Sharira along with it, that is it. Sasharirattasya Atmanaha in that sense. Therefore, it is because of Mithya Pratyaya or Mithya Jnanam or ignorance that people believe that Atma is endowed with, Atma is existing along with the Sharira. Sa Sharirattasya Atmanaha. Mithya Pratyaya Nimittatvad. The very idea that Atma is endowed with Sharira is due to Mithya Pratyaya. This Mithya Jnanam, Mithya Bodham. So Siddham, so it's very obvious. Siddham actually means it is obvious from scriptures. It can be idigamede in that sense. Siddham jivataha api vidusho ashariratvam. The Jivan Mukti state. That is jivataha api. Even for those who are alive, ashariratvam. Vidushaha ashariratvam. Why? Because when a person dies physically, he doesn't attain ashariratvam. Because even after death, it's only the end of the physical body, Sthula Sharira, is Sukshma Sharira continues. But if you are an Ejamana, if you are a Karta, Yajnas and Yagas, if you die, along with you, all the samskaras, all will accompany you when you move to the next life. Tadanta Privattu Ramkhadi Samvarishottaha Prasna Rupanabhya. The Sutra, which is in the Sadhana Dhyaya, it comes, is an analysis, is a discussion, Adhikarana, that is Tadantara Pradivatti Adhikarana. Tadantara Pradivatti Adhikarana means Dekhandara Pradivatti, Antara Pradivatti, Dekhandara Pradivatti. So how a person migrates from one body to another body. So the question is whether is Bhuta Sukshmaihi Alingitaha or na Alingitaha. So whether the Jiva is accompanied by samskaras, vasanas, vrittis, what we call Sukshma Sharira. Our true identity is Sukshma Sharira. Physical body ends with death. And death is only a colon or semicolon, not a full stop in Vedanta. Because you have again Dehantra Pratipatti. So, whether this body is migrating accompanied by Sukshma Bhuta, means Sukshma Samskaras, Vasanas, Vrittis, or not? The answer is the Jiva is accompanied by Sukshma Sharira. So Sukshma Sharira continues to exist. Even the physical Ashariratvam, that means death, physical body, when he pushed the tube, when he dies, when he perishes. That is the physical Ashariratvam, absence of physical body. That's normal death. But that death is not Ashariratvam in the Vedantic sense, because it is still a kind of Shariratvam, because Sukshma Sharira continues to exist. But then a person who is living his Sthula Sharira in this world, that is Jivataha, that way Sasarirattasya Jivata, Siddham Jivataha api. Here Jivataha means somebody who is still living in Sthula Sharira. But actually he can attain Ashariratvam. That Ashariratvam is Jivan Mukti. That is Moksha. So example is given with a famous quotation. So Jivataha api vidushaha Ashariratvam tatha cha Brahma vid Vishaya Sutihi. So this is Sudhi Vakya, Sudhi Pramana related to Brahmajnanis, Brahmavid. Tadyatha ahir nirloyini valmiki mrda pratyastha shaida evamevedam shariram shede atayam ashariro amrda pranu brahmeva teja eva except Brihadaranyaka. So what is mean? Tadyatha ahir, a snake. A snake which is dead, but then it's lying there, living. Its external form is there, lying in a heap of this mud we call ash, Valmika. And then what happens, like that, this body also. Shaida, it is also lying there. But then this reality, even after that experience, at that stage, Asharirata stage, your Sharira Shunya, your Amrita, your Asharira, Amrita, and then your Brahma, your pure Brahman, this Atma is Brahman, because your Sharira Shunya, your Sharira, your Amrita, that is Marana Shunya, and that Atman is Brahman, that is Teja itself. That is the Jivan Mukta state. So, Jivataha api Vidushaka Shariratvam is an example. So I think we will stop now. And tomorrow only we will be able to conclude. So I think we can have a brief discussion. And tomorrow maybe we'll be able to conclude. Tomorrow means another class, day after tomorrow. If I conclude today, there will be nothing to do day after tomorrow. So if you can clear some doubts from previous section, that will be better. Or you can ask we can have some discussions. We won't be able to complete today because the last section is important. So I shall explain this earlier. See, look at the last session. Tasmadaham brahmasmi idi edavasana eva sarve vidheka sarvani cha idarani pramanani etc. It continues. Abhijahu gavanamityatmano sattve putra dehadi vadhanat sad brahmatma ahamityevam bodhe gairi mitha bhavet etc. Annishta vyatma vijnanat prak pramatuttamatmanaha annistasya pramata eva atmadosha adivarjitaha dehatma pratyo yedut pramanatve nagarpidaha Laukikam tattadevedam pramanam tva atmanischayat. So this is the conclusion. And it's actually a conclusion of Vedanta philosophy. And all the other adhikaranas are only built upon these Chatusutri, the Samanya Adhikaranam and the expanded version. Good to study continuation. Okay, we can have some discussion.
Previously, Aditya Yupaha,
Yeah.
it was said that it was Gunavadaha. Now Simhar Mahanvakaha, that becomes Guna. Are they two different expressions, two different propositions?
Yeah, I know. Gunavada is something based on Gaunatvam only.
Both are same
Yeah,
proposition?
Gaunatvam. Gunavada. See, actually, Gaunatvam is related to Guna only. The man whom you call Simha has got the characteristics of Simha based on Guna. That's a Gaunam. Gaunam is related to link to Gunas. But it is not an Arthavada. Arthavada includes, you should be some kind of a Prashastya or Ninda. Here, it is Prashastya. Arthavada should always include an element of glorification.
Three types of Arthavadas.
Anuvada.
Gunavada, Anuvada and
Bhudarthavada.
So under Gunavada, Aditya Yupaha was said actually.
Yeah.
Both are different.
Yeah.
Like Simho Manavaka.
Simha Manava, he Aditya and Yupa, it is used in the context of yagas and yajnas as a praise, as a stuti. There is a mantra in the Samhita. So it is considered to be a kind of praising the role of Yupa. But when you call a person he is a lion among men, it is not Arthavada. Not Arthavada. It is certainly based on his characteristics. It is not Arthavada. It is just Gauna, in a Gauna sense. Gaunatvam is a sense. It is a sense. The other one is the real. You do Sankalpa. The Yupa is meditated upon its Sankalpa to purify or to glorify his place. It is not a statement. Here is only a statement. Simho Manavaka is a statement. Aditya Yupa is used for Aditya Yupa iti Vasida, etc. The other one is a statement. It is not a Kriya. Here is a Kriya. Aditya Yupa is a Kriya. Anuvada is different from this Gunavada. Anuvada is different.
Maharaj, this what we discussed just now, this Atma Sharir Sambandha, this like Raja Pravriti is Puru Paksha is trying to, this king gets things done through servants, like that Atma and Sharir relation is there. So that this Advaitin is not accepting. There is no relation.
Yes.
So if there is no relation in Vyavaharik matter like Brahmanana Hantavyam, Surama, Pivet, all that you can do because it is Atma will not be affected.
It's, when Advaitins say that this sambandha between Atma and Sharira is purely Mithya Jnana Nimitta, based because of Mithya Jnana, is from the highest Paramarthika standpoint. Brahmanona Hantavya, all these vitis are only at Vyavaharika level. All vitis are according to Advaitins at Vyavaharika level. But Advaita philosophy is always projected from the Paramarthika standpoint. Actually, the word Mithyatvam of this Atma Sarira Sambandha can be understood only on the basis of Paramarthika. Actually, analysis, calling something Mithya is not possible at the Vyavaharika level. You call something Mithya only from a level which is beyond Mithya, that is Paramarthika. The concept of Mithyatvam can be understood only at the philosophical level of Paramarthika. Because Mithyatvam is Vyavaharika only. So all these five definitions of Mithyatvam, the Advaitic text that you find, are only based on the perception from the Paramarthika standpoint. I already told those 5 definitions. There's no need to repeat again. Okay?
In that case, in Vyavaharika Atma Sharira Sambandha is there.
Certainly. Vyavaharika Atma, we cannot do anything without Atma Sharira Sambandha. But that Sambandha is not real. It is only Mithya Jnana Nimittam. But the analysis that it is because of Mithya Jnanam, that analysis from the Paramarthika standpoint, from the Vyavaharika standpoint, you cannot say anything Mithya. Vyavaharika is itself Mithya. A dreamer, whatever he sees in dream, is not dream. You call it a dream only when you come out of dream. When you are seeing dream is the real thing for you. You call it dream only when you come out of it. So Mithyatvam can be even intellectually understood only from the Paramarthika perspective. That's the point. That is why in Drishti Srishtivada, they don't accept Mithyatvam. They accept only Paramarthika and Bhashyam. Of course, for them it makes no difference. Everything is from the Paramarthika standpoint. We will need only just 1 class at the most. So if I conclude now, it will be, I have to hurry up. So that's why I want to put it. I don't know if you have understood everything, the previous sutras, you can ask if you want. Especially the Adhikarana analysis, Nyayamala, Vaiyasika Nyayamala, all these are important. Sometimes, we have been fast, some of the Adhikaranas that you can, because doubt you can ask any sutras, the Vaiyasika Nyayamala, that is normally included not in your text. Do you have your text about Vaiyasika Nyayamala? So that's okay.
In the 3rd Sutra, Maharaj,
Yeah.
Why there are 2 different explanations?
Yeah, I'll tell you. That's it. That's so you could ask, I can explain. That is 3rd Sutra, is it so? Okay. Yeah, Shastra Yonitvavat. The Bhashyam, yes. Okay, yeah, so Athava Yadhoktam Rigvedadi Shastram Yoni Karanam. Yeah. The reason is how I mentioned earlier, that is, the first description is this phenomenal world, Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda, all the 10 Vidyasthanas, which includes all these, the entire human existence. Rigveda Dehi Shastrasya Anega Vidyasthana Vabrumkidasya Pradipavad etc. These Vidyasthanas include all the aspects of human existence, all living beings within the Kala Desha Nimitta dimension. So it is so mind-boggling. So the creator of this phenomenal existence should be far greater than the phenomenal existence itself. Giving the example, Pranini Vyakarana was given here. So, because the author of Vyakarana should know more about Vyakarana than the text itself. Therefore, Asya Mahado Bhudasya Nishchasitam Edat Rigvedadehi Rigveda Ityadi Sutehi Tasya Mahado Bhudasya Niridisayam Sarvajnyatum Sarvashaktivantum Chaidi. So, again, Leela Nyayena Purusha Nishwasavat Idasmagam Mahado Bhudadyonihi etc. So Leela Nyaya I already mentioned, the most effortless, natural, spontaneous activity that comes without any effort. Like that, this Brahman has created this mind-boggling phenomenon existence. And that cannot come out of anyone other than somebody who is Sarvajna, who is Sarvashaktimat, etc. All these actions are given there. Now, this may be mistaken to be a kind of Anumana Vakyam. If it is so great, and if the creation is so great, the creator should be so much greater. This is Anumana. Now, so Bhashyakara says there is a defect here. So in that case, it should be made complete. For that Bhashyakara says, the word Shastram should be included in this interpretation. Shastram was not included in this interpretation. Therefore, the third sutra, Shastraya Nitva, is introduced. That is another Athava. Yadoktam Rigvedadi Shastram Yonihi Karanam Pramanam Asyam Brahmano Yadhava Surubhadigami Shastra Deva Pramana Jagadu Janmaji Karanam Brahmadigami Dicha Shastram Udakradam Purva Sutra Yatava Imani Budhani Jayandita, etc. But then the Shastram word, the word Shastra itself was not used here. Therefore, to avoid the problem, the third sutra is introduced. That is another possible interpretation. That's the idea behind it.
In the first interpretation, Brahman is said to be Karanam of Shastra.
Yeah.
And the second interpretation, Shastras are said to be Karanam of Brahman.
No Karana. The word Shastram should be included. If the Shastram is included, then no one can blame that it is just an Anumana. If it is Anumana, then it is incomplete because Shankaracharya says Shruti should be included. Anumanam cannot be a means for Shastra, for Vedanta. Only Shruti Anumata Yukti is needed. Yukti.
Brahmana Karanam Shastram.
Yeah, that's true.
Second interpretation. Shastram Karanam Pramanasya Brahmana.
Yeah, that is Shastram is introduced. The word Shastram is introduced. Without, that's what to introduce Shastra. It's already there. My text is different, I don't have that. My text with me is a different text. So, let's see. Athava, Athava yadokta Rigveda Shastram yoni karanam pramanam asya brahmano yadhava suruvadhigame. So another Vyakhyanam, another interpretation is given. With Brahma Swarupa, to understand, you need Rigveda. To understand properly, Rigveda, etc. Rigvedadi Shastram. Rigveda itself is called Shastram here. But the word Shastra was not mentioned in so many words in the Sutra itself. In the previous interpretations. The word Shastram was not used. You can see. Shastra Deva Pramana Janyada Janmadikaranam Pramaditya Viprayaka Shastram Udakadam Purva Sutra Edava Imani Budhani Jayandi Kimatham Tarhidam Sutram Yavada Purva Sutra Eva Idam Jatiyadagam Shastram Udakarada Shastram Nitam Brahmanadarsidam. So the answer comes here. Uchyadi Tatra Purva Sutra Aksharena Spashtam Shastrasya Anupadanadi Janmadi Kevalam Anumanam Vanyastam Ityashankiyata. Kevalam Anumanam Upanyastam iti Ashankiyata. How Shastrasya Anupadanadi Janmadi. So Janmadi Sutra is in the form of an Anumana Vakyam. So that can cause a misunderstanding. Kevalam Anumanam Upanyastam iti. There can be a Shanka that from this sutra, just Anumana Vakya is introduced. And if it is reduced to Anumana Vakya, that will go against Shankara's main hypothesis. What is hypothesis? Shruti should be introduced. For every yukti statement, a pramana should be introduced. Lakshana is linked to yukti. Lakshana will explain the exact characteristic, distinguishing characteristics of that and the subject. Pramanam is important. Pramanam means Vedanta Pramanam. So means Shastram, the word Shastram was not used. That's why Purva Sutraksharena Spashtam Shastrasya Anubadanadi. So in the previous sutra, the padas, the sutra, the word Shastra is not included. So that sutra may be interpreted just as an Anumana Vakyam. Such a doubt can arise. To avoid this doubt, the next sutra is introduced. That's why the next interpretation is based on Shastra. To bring in the Shastratvam, the Shastra aspect, to remove the misunderstanding that can be just Anumana Vakya. Is that clear to you? That's the importance. Shastra Yonitvad. Otherwise, Janmadesya includes everything. That is in the form of an Anumana Vakya. That is the Rasa Lakshana. So that can be interpreted as an Anumana Vakyam. Janmadi Asya Yataha Tad Brahma. That is Anumana Vakyam. So it is incomplete. That's only Lakshana, Tarastha Lakshana. So Bhashyam says you have to bring the Shastra Pramanam. To include Shastra Pramanam, the next sutra is included. Actually, I tell you, you should focus more on the evolution of the philosophical concepts. Since you are in training center as a brahmachari, this question would have some meaning. But now you have left years behind that stage. Now what you should do, you should focus on a proper understanding of the philosophical concepts of Vedanta. That should be the goal. Whatever is obvious from this book, it's very clear. Already see. Uchyade tatra purva sutraksharena spashtam shastrasya anubadanadi janmadi kevalam anumanam upanyastam iti ashankera. Very clear. Just we have already given an upanyasa, introduced. Just anumana vakyam. Ashankeda tam ashankam nivartayidum sutram pravavrute shastrayonitvad iti. Clearly stated. Tam ashankam nivartayidum. What is ashanka? It is just an anumana vakyam. Janmadeshyataha can be anumana vakyam. So, to avoid that problem, tam ashankam nivartayidum idam sutram pravavrute. It's very, very simple Sanskrit. What I would suggest you to do is to focus on clarification of the basic concepts of Advaita. It's not clearly grasped very often. That leads to all kinds of misunderstanding, especially in the context of other systems of philosophy. That's the main thing. For example, one big problem is depending upon translations too much. That too, English translations. That is a serious problem. English translation can never do full justice, can cause misunderstandings. So that's what you should do at this stage. You'll be teaching for years. So you should try to go as close as possible to the original scripture. For that, if at all you read, you need a translation, retranslation, Indian vernacular, and not English. Of course, English translation by the great Swamis and scholars in India are certainly far better. Unfortunately, people depend upon translations by Western authors who have no access to the original scriptures, the original parampara. Even Paraksha Jnanam also has got a parampara. So that's why you can devote the remaining time to clarify those doubts. If you have got any doubt, otherwise you can conclude any doubts. See, the basic concept, Maya, Karma, all the Very, very confusing concept for those who don't have access to the parampara tradition. Parampara teaches everything clearly. Just imagine, already mentioned in this scripture itself, the beginning of the Adhyasa Vakyam, for example. People don't even distinguish the difference between Purvapaksha and Siddhanta. They quote Purvapaksha and say Shankara said this. You don't understand, he should leave Purvapaksha only. So therefore, they quote Purvapaksha and vigorously aggressive arguments against Advaita, put forward Purvapaksha is quoted and put in the head of Shankaracharya. This happens. That's why, for example, Yushma Dasma Purtayogo up to Mithya iti Bhavidam Yuktam. Actually, this is a kind of Shankara Grantha, it is called. And then, why Yadyapi is avoided, because Tathapi is after that, to indicate there is only a Mangalacharana in that direction. Like these are important things. Okay. The Khyadivada, you need not worry too much. There are many Vadas in Vedanta, but those who are studying primarily, not very specifically, you have to think of Satkarya-vadas, Asatkarya-vadas. That's all. That should be understood. To distinguish Vivarta from Parinama, that's all. Otherwise, the basic Advaitic concept should be clarified. Anything that you can ask, you can do now. Okay? Okay, thank you. Everything clear? So we will have the last class day after tomorrow after your pilgrimage. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.